Hi, I'm Connor Jones.
Hi, I'm Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Denison-informed podcast where we navigate the constant stream of top stories in news, politics, sports, pop culture, technology, basically everything happening in culture, and we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. And Micah, it happened yesterday. The JFK files, they finally came out, so maybe we need to discuss that in a little bit. But, well, I mean, what are you thinking?
Hey, man, I have not had the chance to read all 80,000 pages yet, but I'm just kind of hoping some people who are fast readers, maybe the utilization of AI, we can figure out what we didn't know. But I haven't seen a lot of breaking news about this big bombshell. But anyway, we'll talk about that.
Good. Sweet. Yeah, we'll share some thoughts. But what else are we going to be talking about today, Micah?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about astronauts returning after being stranded. An 8-day mission turns into a 9-month mission, and they just crash landed back on Earth, technically in the ocean. This week, the Civil War and the Democratic Party not really seeming to have a unified strategy. We're going to give you updates on the latest negotiations with Russia and Ukraine and the U.S. brokering those talks. And then we're going to talk March Madness and so much more. So let's jump into The Brief.
The Brief.
All right. So before we jump into our first official story today, I want to kind of give a quick overview and update on the Russia-Ukraine peace talks and the ceasefire that they're shooting for right now. So Trump and Putin had a more than 2-hour phone call on Tuesday, and they laid out a possible path to the end of the war in Ukraine. First steps include a 30-day ceasefire, as well as technical negotiations on the implementation of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea, full ceasefire, and then permanent peace. So these negotiations will begin immediately in the Middle East. So there has been a framework agreed to specifically on Russia is going to stop attacking Ukraine's energy infrastructure for the next 30 days. And then the goal is, and the hope is that everybody will be able to come to the table and negotiate something further in that to actually be able to negotiate a full ceasefire, not just on that one specific thing. So this story is ever evolving, and we'll give you some updates on this next week when more things come to light and more things are set in stone.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully we do see a ceasefire come about. I think it's going to be a step-by-step process. Stop shooting at these type of things like energy infrastructure. Then it's going to move into like ports and technological sections of their countries. And so we'll just see Zelensky's getting brought in to the conversations now. This goes back to what we talked about a few weeks ago. The U.S. and Russia are kind of doing this on their own and without Ukraine in there. So the Ukrainians are hopeful to actually be a part of the conversations going forward. So we'll just see.
Yes, right. I mean, they're going to bring Ukraine in, and then they're going to bring the European Union in and NATO in, and then, obviously these Middle Eastern countries as well. So, the goal is to put all the pieces of the puzzle together to hopefully bring about a lasting peace. I mean, and that's something definitely worth praying about. For peace of what's happening over there and the end to that war. Okay, Connor, well, let's jump into our first official story, astronauts returning home. So let me just explain to you what happened, because I think we've all heard at least something about these astronauts, Barry Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams. So their mission was extended beyond expectation with NASA. So they have returned to Earth.
That's an understatement,
right? They've returned to Earth after an unplanned 9-month stay aboard the International Space Station, or ISS for you space nerds out there. They originally launched in June 2024 aboard Boeing Starliner for what was supposed to be an 8-day test flight. Okay, an 8-day test flight, but technical issues with the spacecraft prolonged their mission indefinitely. They didn't know when they were coming home. This unexpected delay forced the astronauts to adjust to an extended stay in space while awaiting a safe return plan. So we were hearing updates about this, Connor. They were initially stranded. Okay, we'll get them back in 30 days instead of 8 days. Okay, we'll get them back in 60 days, 90 days. And then before you know it, it's a 9-month stay. And it's actually just kind of crazy to think about. There were definitely some difficulties for them, but just the foresight to plan ahead like that, to be up there for that long and to actually have the sustenance that you need and to be able to take what you thought. Like if I was going to take an 8-day trip, I might be like, okay, I'll pack an extra pair of socks. You know what I mean? But like, I'm not preparing for 9 months.
Yeah, grab some Klondike bars and just be like, okay, we got to stay one extra night. We'll be good.
What's the jingle for Klondike? Connor, can you sing it? Do you remember?
I actually genuinely have no idea.
What would you do for a Klondike bar?
Oh, yeah.
You remember that?
kind of.
Anyway,
I don't
what were you
watch
going to say?
commercials. That's a different conversation.
Did you interrupt me or did I interrupt you? What happened there?
I'm honestly not sure. What I was going to say is, yeah, they sort of had the foresight. They thought there's a potential they could have to be there longer, because this was the first time this Boeing aircraft or spacecraft was used. So they knew that there was a potential that something could go wrong. They could get to the space station, and for whatever reason, the spacecraft would not be adequate to bring back to Earth, at least not with them on board. Because it did come back. I think they brought the spacecraft back in like September. Yeah. Just without them, because there was too much risk of it essentially exploding on the return to Earth. So they knew there was potential. I don't think they ever thought, hey, this could end up being a whole pregnancy worth of staying in space.
First, second, and third trimester. Yeah, good analogy there, Connor. So let me talk to you about the life that they had aboard the ISS, aboard the International Space Station. So during their time on the ISS, Wilmore and Williams contributed to ongoing scientific research, station maintenance, and other critical operations. So if you're worried about where our taxpayer dollars are going, to NASA, they were up there working, okay? They weren't just sitting around, floating around, having a good time. They endured the physical toll of long-duration space flight, including potential muscle atrophy, bone density loss, vision impairment, and fluid buildup in the head due to prolonged exposure to microgravity. So this is like from my research, like what happens when you're in space for a long time, right? And those are kind of the symptoms of what can happen. So despite these challenges, they remained in good spirits, adapting to the circumstances and appreciating the rare opportunity to experience extended space flight and extended time in space. But here's a fun fact that I read this morning, actually, Connor. During their 9-month trip, Wilmore and Williams orbited the Earth 4,576 times, and they traveled 121 million miles total. Whew. So how's that for a road trip, right? Golly.
Yeah, I mean, a road trip where you don't even get to go outside. Yeah. I mean, you're just like stuck in the car the whole time.
Yeah. So here's their return journey and what happened. For the long-awaited return, Wilmore and Williams were joined by NASA astronaut Nick Hague and then Russian cosmonaut Alexander Gorbunov. The crew departed the ISS aboard a SpaceX Dragon capsule, undocking at 1:05 a.m. on March 18th, and then they re-entered Earth's atmosphere and they safely splashed down off the coast of Florida at 5:57 p.m., marking the successful completion of their prolonged mission. You were telling me earlier, Connor, I didn't see this part of the video. What happened when the pod landed in the ocean?
Man, these dolphins came up and just started like jumping up and down right around there. It was cool. It was like a welcome back to Earth type of thing. Like there was just some dolphins. They were hanging out,
My goodness,
and
yeah.
They said, hey, welcome back.
Yep. So here's what this means for future space flight. When a mission goes from 8 days to 9 months, that's no small thing, right? So their extended stay highlights both the unpredictability of space travel and the resilience of astronauts in the face of, an unforeseen prolonged challenge there. It also it kind of underscores the importance of commercial partnerships. So Boeing and SpaceX playing crucial roles in crewed space missions, so working together as NASA and its partners continue developing spacecraft for future deep space exploration. Lessons from this mission will refine procedures for trips to the moon and Mars and beyond. So Connor, what would your first reaction be if you knew that your 8-day mission to space was going to turn into a whole lot longer? Maybe 9 months. What would your first reaction to that be?
I honestly, Micah, this sounds like my worst nightmare. I mean, I'm sure that these two were like, okay, but they kept getting extended. At first it was like, you guys are going to be there an extra week. They were probably like, that's fine. We've waited our whole lives to be in space. We'll take the extra week, And a lot of astronauts, they long for that time up in space. Good for them, not me, man. This is my worst nightmare, being stuck on something so far away from home.
Yeah,
and just I would be just thinking about my family. I would be thinking about my couch and my TV. Like, how do you keep up with all the popular shows going on when you're in space?
Yeah,
I don't think I would do well, but I'm happy that they had good spirits the whole time. They had the opportunity to have full-on meltdowns. This is what sci-fi movies are made of, where people get stuck in conditions like this and then they start to
feeling
deteriorate.
Claustrophobic and all that stuff. And I'm sure that, Connor, I feel the same way. Like it would freak me out. But there's I'm sure whenever they kind of get their strength back and they acclimate back to life on literal planet Earth, that there's going to be a lot of interviews that they give where we're going to be able to gain more context of how was this, what was this like, how you feeling, all that stuff. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But Dr. Dennison,
maybe.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say maybe in the back of their head they're like, cha-ching, like they're gonna get like book deals and documentaries and like,
Yes.
I doubt that's what came to their mind, but it's probably gonna happen. They're just gonna get more exposure from this.
I saw this article that was talking about how the astronauts aren't going to get like any bonus or like overtime pay from NASA
because they were salary.
They're just going to get paid their regular salary. And I was like, okay, I mean, maybe give them a little, like a little Christmas bonus early or something.
Doge said, nope, not today.
That's right. Crack down on them. All right. So Dr. Jim Dennison, who's the co-founder and the CEO of Dennison Ministries, he's a cultural theologian, brilliant guy, great guy. He compares the return of astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore to our own journey through life and into eternity in one of his daily articles this week. Connor, I read this daily article and it really struck me. So I'm just going to kind of give an overview of what the daily article said and how this mission to space, this unexpected journey can kind of apply to our lives. So just like the International Space Station isn't their true home, isn't the astronauts' true home, this world isn't ours either as Christians. We're here for a short period of time. Right? But convincing people of an unseen eternity isn't easy, just like it would be tough to persuade someone born on the ISS that Earth exists, right? So it's this concept of you're told that there is this eternity, but all your reality is Earth. So just like somebody born on the International Space Station, they can be told Earth is real, but maybe they haven't seen it, right? And so Dr. Dennison gives 3 reasons why faith in eternity makes sense, even beyond just saying eternity is real. Number 1, Jesus came to earth and gave us real historical proof, verified proof outside of Scripture. You can stack it stories and stories high, the accounts of Jesus' death, burial, but most importantly, his resurrection, appearing to his disciples, appearing to those 500 people, defeating death, defeating the grave. So Jesus came and said, I came to give you life and give it to the fullest. He came and he said that eternal life will only come through me. You'll only come to the Father but by me. And he proved it by defeating death, by raising himself from the dead. And so when somebody pulls that off, we need to listen to their words. And then secondly, the Holy Spirit is still at work and he's transforming lives. So us as believers taking the commission seriously, I think that sometimes we psych ourselves up or psych ourselves out about evangelism, but we need to make sure that we're doing our job as believers to bring as many people to heaven with us as we can. And it all starts with being open about your story. Here's where I was. Here's where I am. Here was my desire. Here's where my desire is now. This is what the world is telling us all to do, but this is what I believe that I'm called to do. And that is such a powerful way to evangelize. And then thirdly, living for eternity actually makes life better now, gives you perspective now, gives you hope and peace and comfort and direction now, knowing that all of the trials and the beauty that we face while here on earth, it's leading to something far greater, eternity in heaven with Jesus. What are your thoughts on that, Connor?
Man, that's just good truth. It's where our hope lies, right? We know what lies on the other side, and we have that faith. Yeah, it's something that we cannot see, but we know that it's real. We know that it's true, and I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, thanks for that word, Micah. That's good stuff.
Yep.
And glad the astronauts are back. Glad that we have a hope in heaven, knowing that that's real, and just keeping the word going, the gospel going.
Yep.
That's what we're called to do. So thank you for that. Okay, let's move into something that's just kind of been taking DC by storm this week, and that is, man, the Democrats are just lost at sea. They are completely directionless. They don't have a captain right now to guide them through the storm in the sea.
Right.
Like, they are just in a world of hurt, and some people are calling it a Democratic civil war within their own party, which, to be clear, the Republicans have gone through this in the past themselves. In fact, over the last decade, it's felt like a Republican civil war as the school McCain-Romney Republican Party transferred into this kind of Trump-driven MAGA Republican Party. So now it's almost like it's the Democrats' turn, and they are just in a world of hurt. And it has gotten worse and worse seemingly every week since the 2024 election, where they got beat pretty handedly and lost their majorities in the House and Senate, and obviously the presidential election as well. So all that to say, here's what's been happening. Last week, we talked about the government potentially shutting down. That was averted, which is, I think, a good thing. The government did not shut down at midnight on Friday, but that's only because Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer came out and said he was going to vote to keep the government open. And that opened the floodgates of the Democratic Party just coming out against him. They turned on him. They have been saying he's a bad leader, that he should never have done this. He caved to the Trump administration and to the Republicans. But really, honestly, Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, kind of handed it off to him because he was able to push through the bill keeping the government open in the House, just barely, but he did. And that was where people thought maybe it wouldn't pass the House. But so when it passed the House, it became the Senate's problem. And that is where Chuck Schumer had to step in and say what he was going to do. And he was kind of between a rock and a hard place, because if he said, let's shut the government down, well, then that also makes the Democrats look bad. They're the ones who put the government in this position and shut it down. And then that might harm the economy and all of that. But then his own party's like, well, we wanted it to shut down because we don't want Trump to have all the power.
That's right.
Specifically with DOJ and everything that this bill allows to go on. So, enough Senate Democrats did vote to keep it open. So it wasn't just Schumer. There were, I think, 8 other Democrats, maybe 9 others that stuck with him and voted to keep it open. And, now Democrats are saying this is going to further empower Trump and damage the party. A lot of them consider Schumer's decision to be so heinous that they are questioning whether he should step down as their leader. And he's kind of the de facto leader of the party right now because they don't have a real leader. And The Hill had an article saying that they are, Schumer started this quote unquote civil war within the party. Representative Jim McGovern, who's a Democratic congressman out of Massachusetts, said he was extremely disappointed after he heard the news. And he noted that it gives them the ability, Elon Musk specifically, the ability to go through and continue to do expletive what he's doing.
Yeah.
So they are just mad. What are your initial thoughts there, Micah?
Yeah. I think Chuck Schumer wouldn't have come out because he made this statement and he said, we're going to support this funding bill. I'm supporting this funding bill. He didn't implicate anybody. And so right when he came out and said that, Chuck Schumer's been doing this for a long time. He's got a lot of experience. So Chuck Schumer is not going to come out and make that statement without already having the vote secured. So whenever he came out and made that statement, I knew that he had at least 10 Democrats in the Senate that were going to vote for this bill. But obviously, the Republicans were able to unite. They have a 4-seat majority in the House, which is tiny because there's a lot more members of the House than there is the Senate. And it's all about Mike Johnson's ability to be able to unite the Republican vote around what they're doing. So they were able to pass it through the House without any Democratic support whatsoever, which is actually kind of rare, okay, to be able to have that type of unity within your party. But you made such a good point earlier, Connor, when you said that it's it's weird to see this happen to the Democrats because that has been one of their biggest strong suits. They have been unified. They have been unified really since 2008, since Obama, you know what I mean? And then everything kind of has changed with the Republican Party, and it's been all this infighting within the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is pretty unified right now. Now, you could argue if they want to be or not, but they're choosing to be, right?
Yeah.
And it's just interesting to see this happen within the Democratic Party right now.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's an interesting time. So Schumer did deliver a 10-minute speech on the Senate floor, kind of defending his decision there.
Afterwards,
and then he published an opinion article in the New York Times this past week titled "Trump and Musk would love a shutdown. Oof. We must not give them one." So he's standing behind his convictions. He's like, yeah, I want to keep the government open because if we shut it down, it gives them all the fire in the world to come back and hit them with, well, you guys are the reason the government shut down.
That's right.
Republican House passed it. Yeah. Trump was ready to sign the bill to keep the government open, and it's the Democrats keeping the government closed.
It was a lose-lose for Democrats. It really was. Yeah.
That's why I don't know. The Democrat Party turning on Schumer is like, I don't know what you guys were expecting. Like, what did you want to happen? Anyways, activist organizations that are Democratic activist organizations, such as the organization called Indivisible, have called for Schumer's resignation and advocated for a more assertive leadership to oppose the Republican initiative. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who just ran with Kamala Harris as her vice president pick, came out and criticized Schumer's decision and suggested that it compromised this party's leverage and could lead to negative consequences for Americans. And then Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, many call her AOC, She is also from New York, like Schumer, has argued that Schumer's, quote, almost unthinkable move caused a deep sense of outrage and betrayal across the Democrats' ideological spectrum. And she notably did not rule out a primary challenge against him, so she could come for his seat in the Senate if she would like to.
She's very popular
She's very popular, especially with
in
young
the younger,
people.
more progressive wing of the Democratic Party. She's very popular. She's the future of the party.
Yeah, she very well could be. She might be that leader that the Democrats need. I think she's almost too progressive for a lot of their tastes, so we'll see what happens there. But
yeah.
Meanwhile, Micah, while all of this is happening, a poll came out. Literally, Schumer, I think it was on Wednesday, said he's going to vote to keep the government open. And on like Thursday, this CNN poll came out showing that the Democrat Party's favorability rating among Americans is at a record low. They are just in a sea of hurt. And so that obviously that followed the 2024 election that really kind of highlighted the party's total misread of the just general American public and the average American life. And their party now obviously is embroiled in a debate over whether to like adopt a more combative stance against Republicans and their policies or to strategically choose their battles. Should they ditch DEI and, quote, woke policies completely or stand behind those policies? Should they go even harder on those? We'll just see what they do. But right now, like I said, there's no real like identifiable leader, or there's not even like a rising star. Maybe you could say AOC. There's just not that person in the wings like Barack Obama was in like 2006. People were like, okay, that's our guy.
Somebody
that's
will emerge. We're just not seeing him right now.
Will.
Yeah.
It's just there's no one who's out there right now that's like that's their future party leader, their future presidential pick, all of that. And that's particularly bad right now because J.D. Vance seems to be the heir apparent in the MAGA world and in the Republican world. So they've got that already set up on the right side of the aisle. So what about the left side? Anyways, any other thoughts on that, Micah?
No, I mean, what was interesting is, did you see Gavin Newsom? I think we talked about his new podcast, but I mean, he's really, I mean, his new podcast is interesting because he's inviting guys like Steve Bannon, Charlie Kirk. There was another conservative type person that he invited on there.
Michael Savage.
Yeah. So it's an interesting approach because what he's doing is like, you know, the right has kind of dominated the podcast platforms. And then Gavin Newsom is getting on there and, you know, agreeing with some of their points. And it's really infuriating the Democratic Party. And you know, oddly enough, like it really does kind of seem like Gavin Newsom is kind of changing up his strategy a little bit and trying to reach across the aisle. And so, you know, you talk about like a rising star. I think if Gavin kind of sticks to that over the next few years, he could change his image because he's just seems so far left as the governor of California. But if he can kind of come more to the middle, because he is a very good speaker and he is very strong in his approach to leadership, I think that he could be a rising star in the Democratic Party that could eventually take it over.
Yeah, he could be. And I think he is kind of a star already in a sense. I just think Democrats have been wary about him because California gets hit so hard as being the most progressive state. And I think that this is super strategic on his part to try to rebrand himself.
It's smart, man.
You're saying reach across the aisle, which, yeah, maybe. But also is it him just trying to almost just distance himself from everything that he is known as the progressive. He doesn't want to repeat what Kamala Harris just went through, where she was identified with all these progressive ideologies. And it's easy to hit him with that. But yeah, he did have that super viral clip go out from his very first episode with Charlie Kirk, who's like a right-wing commentator and influencer big in Trump world. And he essentially pushed back against having transgenders in sports. He said it was, let me find the quote
deeply
here. Deeply unfair.
That biological males would be competing in women's sports, and that
and
that
the
was
Democrat
a firestorm.
Party did not like that because they were like, "What are you talking about? You've been so pro LGBTQ policies and transgender policies."
180,
and this was like his first step. This was the very first episode, and that clip went viral. And then I've listened to most of these episodes so far. They have been interesting conversations just to hear, and it's a very clear step of him trying to get in the minds of people, just trying to kind of already set himself up for a run in 2028.
You know, this is the thing. The Democratic Party knows that they need a change, that they need a shift. The argument comes down to, what do we shift to? How do we change? You know, you talked about DEI, what people will call woke policies, open border type policies, which don't poll well for them.
Right.
So they all know they need a change, but the argument within the party, the Civil War, a lot of it has to do with the old guard versus the new guard, but it's really just the ideology of what are we going to leave behind and what are we going to push as a party. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we will. I don't know. Anyways, so just when you hear all of this, you might feel one or two different ways depending on what side of the aisle you tend to land on. Maybe you're an independent and you're like, this is just chaos. I don't really care that much. But if you're a Republican, maybe you're celebrating. If you're a Democrat, maybe you're feeling tormented. Like you're just like, oh, this is awful to watch from afar as my party just eats itself alive. And like I said, independents might just be sitting there like, okay, it's actually good to have two strong parties because it's in a way a checks and balance system, right? You've got a party cycle that tends to happen. It's usually Democrat, Republican, House, Senate, and presidents in the elections. And so, it's just an interesting time for the Democrats. But in today's online environment, it's very easy for us to express our own positions and oppose anyone who has a different ideology or thought. And we can easily, have increased rhetorical extremes, name calling, all of that. And as a result, Micah, I think opposing sides view each other as evil enemies more than ever before. Yeah. And might even feel justified in doing anything to defeat them. So this could be true within a party or against parties. So there's people in the Democrat Party who they see Chuck Schumer as just caving in, and now they might consider him like evil in a sense. Yeah. I don't think it's that extreme, but it could go that way. And Abraham Lincoln actually sent a warning to us hundreds of years ago. This is how nations die, by suicide, he said, when we're so divided. And obviously he saw the nation divided at its worst in the Civil War, and it almost took the entire country down. So we need biblical wisdom to guide our own autonomy and community to preserve our democracy. Exodus 22 commands us, Micah, that you shall not revile God nor curse a ruler of your people. And Ecclesiastes 10 actually takes it even further, and it says, even in your thoughts do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich, for a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter. Today, I would say, and actually this is something that came from Dr. Jim Dennison, another article he wrote this week too, and he noted that your cell phone, in a way, is a bird of the air in that scripture verse. So how do we respond to these political leaders? He noted that we should refuse to slander, and the Bible specifically actually forbids slander of all kinds. It says in 1 Peter 2:1, put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. So if we're going to if we're in a conflict with someone, we're really called to go directly to them. It says that in Matthew 18:15. And if we know that they are in conflict with us, we are to do the same. Yeah. So Micah, if you and I have a beef, we need to go to each other. We don't need to be slandering each other behind one another's back, right? That's not the best way to handle that. And think about just how much anger and animosity and damage could be avoided if that's how we spoke with others and with people that are kind of seeing things differently in our lives. Yep. Respectfully, I disagree type of situation. It doesn't help to slander. It's better to have conversations. And then Paul, he taught us Romans 13:1. Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those who exist have been instituted by God. And accordingly, pay to all what is owed to them, taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. And Peter agreed with that too in 1 Peter 2:13 and 14. And he even said we're to honor everyone and love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the emperor. And so even when we can't necessarily respect the person, we are to respect the position. The apostles taught us early on that kind of concept with the governing authorities, because the emperor at the time was Nero, and he was awful. Yep. I mean, he was just horrible, horrific, immoral ruler. But the apostles knew they had to honor the position, even when they could not honor the person. And so one way to do that is through just intercession. And that's one of the things we can take is 1 Timothy 2:1 and 2 that says, I urge the supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. And so, Micah, just as a final note here, it is difficult to slander people when we're praying for them.
Oh, amen.
So that is an encouragement to pray for anyone in your life that you may have conflict with. Pray for the leaders of opposing parties in your own country, in your own just state, city, whatever it is. If you're a Republican, pray for the Democrats. If you're a Democrat, pray for the Republicans. The leaders are there for a reason. We respect the position, even if we struggle to respect the person.
Yeah, good stuff, Connor. Amen, brother. I'm in total agreement with you. And I think that this is one way that we can encourage each other, even as we're having this conversation, but our audience who listens, and Denison Ministry, specifically Denison Forum, seeking to discern the news differently, is how do we take the overwhelming news and boil it down to where we can take it off in bite-sized pieces and say, God, what would you have me do with this?
Yeah.
And I think that we can glean so many lessons from the overwhelming nature in the news and really just see the destructive nature of it, just the destruction from what's happening in this story that you just talked about. How can we apply it to our own lives? And when there's not peace in Washington, let's have peace in our homes. Let's have peace in our hearts. Let's have peace in our families and in our relationships. So good stuff, Connor. Thank you for that. So we're going to jump straight into a tune-in section, and we're going to give you quite a few things to tune into and to pay attention to in what's coming up. So the first thing that we want to update you on is the Israel-Gaza war has been reignited. I don't think any of us wanted to see this. I think to a certain extent, you can see why it had to happen, but at the same time, you hate to see it, and you hate to see all the suffering, and this potentially being reignited. Hopefully peace can come back to this situation. But Hamas has refused to hand over the remaining hostages. This has been happening for weeks, right? And the original ceasefire deal did expire. So Israel executed airstrikes on Gaza. I'm going to say this real quick. When you're reading news on this, and obviously our ministry, Denison Forum, does support Israel to a point, as much as we can, of what lines up with God's word. But I'll just say this. I've seen a lot of outlets report on this, and they bury the fact that the ceasefire expired. And they bury the fact that some of those hostages have not been released. And it's just jumped straight to all these people have been killed. There's all this carnage, almost as if there's no reason for it. So I'm just going to point that out. I've noticed that. I don't know if you've noticed that, Connor, but the U.S. has been launching airstrikes at Houthi locations in Yemen, who have in turn launched missiles at the U.S. and Israel. So these Houthi rebels that are supported by Iran, they're basically breaking up all of these trade routes in the Red Sea and stuff like that. And so it's disrupting all of the international trade. And so Trump is stepping in and bombing the Houthis. And then you see Israel is now bombing Hamas again. So, I mean, it seems as though war is erupting again in the Middle East when there seemed to be this short pause. And so prayerfully, peace can come back to that region. But this story will be ever evolving, and we'll do our best to keep you in the loop.
Yeah, there's just a lot happening. It felt like there was a good pause for a while on both the Houthi front and the Israel-Gaza front. And also to clarify, they're launching missiles at U.S. ships.
Yes,
Directly.
Yes.
Yeah, so
yes.
right. I don't think they would have
forbid.
that capability.
No,
but anyways,
right.
That would be a totally different ballgame. But they are launching at U.S. ships. So they are attacking the U.S. Navy, which is not cool.
No,
anyways,
can't do that.
We'll stay up to date with what's going on there. But it is heartbreaking. I mean, we don't want to see innocent people dying in any sort of airstrikes or in hostage tunnels, whatever it is. So continuing to pray there. Okay, Micah, this is what we talked about at the beginning. The JFK files, they did get released this week. Trump promised when he got reelected that he would release all the remaining documents. I mean, we're trusting that this is all the remaining documents, but 80,000 pages. I'm currently sifting through those. I'm on page 1 and trying to go through, Honestly, no, we'll just see the historians have come out, honestly, and said that it's going to take several days to parse through everything and really try to understand what is out there that in these documents that we don't already know. There is a lot of just repetitive things, which is to be expected, but is there anything in there that has been buried all this time? Yeah. So far, I was reading, they dropped last night, and this morning I was reading up on just what potentially has been discovered. Nothing of significance. I know. I mean, it sounds like the KGB was on to Oswald when he was in Russia and said he was a bad shot. So people are clinging to that. Like, okay, was he even able to shoot JFK? Like, was he that bad of a shot? How would he ever be able to hit JFK in the head from the distance that he was at and the angle that he was at and all that? So I don't know. We'll just see what comes out of that. But historians do expect to take several days, and we'll see if they find any major revelations, and we'll just see. I think a lot of Americans are eager to find out. So next, we're going to be waiting on the RFK files, because JFK's brother, Robert F. Kennedy, was killed a few years later and assassinated. And then the MLK files, there's always been questions around his assassination. Nothing's been as high profile as JFK's killing, but there's always been suspicions that there was potential government interference or weird foul play. Well, there's
some things that we don't know,
but like where there are foreign entities behind those, all that. So we will just see.
Yeah, I think we should have more updates when we record next week on this. I mean, we're obviously waiting idly by to see if there's any bombshells dropped. Trump did say nothing is being redacted from those reports. So we'll see what happens. But there is at least 100,000 people yesterday, today, and for the next week that have probably taken off of work and they've printed out all 80,000 pages. Yeah, I'm just imagining somebody in like a dark library with a lamp just sifting through all of it, like trying to find that one thing. So somebody will find something. It might not be as much of a revelation as some are hoping, but somebody will find something because I feel like there's a lot of sleuths on the case right now.
There's definitely sleuths.
So let me jump into the other thing that we should be tuning into. So Trump is pushing the boundaries here, specifically when it comes to the relationship between the executive and the judicial branch. Trump being a part of the executive branch, and then all of these judges, these circuit judges that are, in SCOTUS that are a part of the judicial branch. So Chief Justice John Roberts issued a rare public statement. He rarely issues public statements, and he rebuked Trump and basically rebuked Trump's call to impeach a federal judge who ruled against him over the deportation of alleged Venezuelan gang members. So let's keep an eye on the story as the judicial and executive branches are becoming increasingly at odds. And so as Trump is pushing the boundaries with these executive orders, it's just going to be interesting to see how this plays out and what the actual legality is as the system gets tested.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This is just very interesting. Different judges are coming out against different things that Trump's trying to push through, and he's not happy about it. So, neither are a lot of Republicans. And even Elon Musk is on X every day saying we need to get rid of these judges. They have too much power. So it seems like it's going to come to a head, and at some point, somebody's going to have to step in. And yeah, Chief Justice Roberts doesn't really rebuke. That is a very rare thing. Now, he did not use Trump's name in the statement, but it was very clear who he was talking about, aimed towards. Yeah. So anyways, here's the next big thing. This is what's going to be taking over the full weekend ahead, Micah.
What?
It's time. March Madness.
March Madness, baby. Let's go.
Let's go.
Get your brackets submitted.
Man. Get your brackets submitted. If you're listening to this on Thursday morning, you may still have a few hours left to get that in. I think the first game is at 11:15 Central Time, 12:15 Eastern. So you've got a few hours to get that bracket in. If you're in some sort of bracket game, we're on the Denison Ministries bracket challenge. Mike and I will be competing in that. I've got like 5 brackets I have to fill out tonight, honestly. So we'll just see. Yeah. Who do you think right now, Micah, is going to take home the championship?
You know what? I'm going to go with a local Texas team. The University of Houston has like 4 losses or something like that all year, and they're a number 1 seed. And so how about kind of a Cinderella story of a number 1 seed of a basketball program that doesn't have a ton of historical success? Well, just historically, it's if they win it all, it is kind of a Cinderella story. It's not a blue chip program for college basketball. So Houston being as successful as they've been this year, let's say them. Why not?
Okay. I guess I'll go the opposite direction and take a blue chip program, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick with Duke.
There you go.
I think that they look good. They've got Cooper Flagg. He's like the future star.
Yeah, he's going to be the number 1 pick in the NBA draft. Yeah, very good player.
He's great. So we'll just see. We do love a Cinderella story. I love seeing the schools that I've never heard of just take the tournament by storm and like win 2 games that are totally unexpected.
I cannot wait, man.
Like,
cannot wait.
What was the school a few years ago? They were the Peacocks was their mascot.
Oh gosh.
What was Saint something? Anyways, they were totally unheard of. They were like a 15 seed and made it all the way to the Sweet
Elite
16,
8
and it
put
16, that school on the map. These schools will just get on the map, man. It's awesome. Okay, but before we move on from that, I've got to say a quick hot take, or maybe you agree with me here. I personally think it's more fun to watch and more fun to just be a part of college basketball than it is the NBA, at least right now in the current basketball environment. And so I'm going to say it. College basketball is better than the NBA.
Okay. I was going to say your hot take with your chest, with your full chest. Stand on all 10 toes.
I'm saying it.
And say it. Okay, so you're saying college basketball is better than the NBA. I don't know how I feel about this hot take. Here's how I would frame it. If you are more of an individual fan, then I see why you would enjoy the NBA more, because these players have long careers in the NBA, right? And the NBA gets more media coverage, all that stuff. So, I mean, you have LeBron James. I mean, he's been playing for like over 20 years or whatever. And, many would argue he's the greatest of all time. It's either him or Michael Jordan. So people like that, I mean, if you're more of an individual fan, you're probably going to be a bigger NBA fan. But if you're a fan of team basketball, then I totally understand why you would enjoy college basketball more, because players only stay at their schools for a year or two, really a year if they're good. And so it is these systems that these coaches implement that keep churning out great basketball. And so if you're more of a fan of team basketball, I could totally see how you would enjoy the college basketball more than the NBA.
Yeah, I honestly think the NBA has completely changed the way that they play the game. It's not as, in my opinion, fun as it used to be to watch. The game is almost a mess. It's just, they're trying to adjust that, because a lot of people have been calling it out as the game is no longer as physical. It's mostly 3-pointers, all of that. Whereas college basketball still seems to be fast-paced and energetic and just all over the place. I mean, even last night in the first 4, which is kind of like the pre-tournament, there was a buzzer beater at the end. You just don't get that in the NBA as much, and you just see these awesome endings and competitive games in college basketball.
So
I just
exciting.
think it's fun. I don't know.
So exciting.
Anyways, it's going to be a fun weekend watching that, and we hopefully will have brackets that are not completely busted by next week's episode.
That's right. Everybody get your brackets filled out. Connor, thank you for the impromptu hot take. I think I might agree with you. I have to think about it. Well guys, thank you.
Let me say this. I'll drop a poll on Spotify and on the Culture Brief Instagram. Find us on Instagram, Culture Brief Podcast, or shoot us your hot take on that or response to that at culturebrief@dennisinform.org. And we'll catch your email and let us know what your thoughts are. But I want to see your votes too on Spotify and on our Instagram. We'll have a poll if you think the NBA or college basketball is better.
Yes, thank you for that, Connor. Good call out. I almost forgot that part. Thank you. Yes, please send us your emails or topic ideas or discussion ideas to, again, culturebrief@dennisinform.org. We love them, we appreciate them, and we do our best to implement them into our show. So thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Culture Brief, a Dennis Informed podcast. All articles and videos mentioned will be linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, and rate and review the show, and share with a friend. We'll see you next Thursday.